Ladies and gentlemen, it is April 5th, 2016, and this is the Daily Code. I'm Chris, and here we learn how to code better, or use Google to figure out how other people code better. Today, we are looking at something which I worked on a while ago, which is the SparkPost SDK. Now, a little while ago, MailChimp and Mandrill released some news that they were no longer going to be allowing free transactional email, and the whole world went because basically everyone runs on Mandrill, and everyone started looking for alternatives, and SparkPost became apparent was a good alternative. And I got to chat with some of the folks from SparkPost at a conference in Seattle about a month ago now, and turns out it's a pretty cool service. So I did a stream a while ago where I started making an API for it. And I'll familiarize myself with this API again, so don't worry if you didn't see that daily. But this is what I'm going to do today. And yeah, feel free to ask questions in the chat. I have a couple of things that I think are interesting objectives for tonight and the work I want to do tonight. The first is that I would like to look at testing. I've written far too much of this code without testing, and if I remember correctly, I wrote the original, almost the complete implementation of what I did without running it once. So it's probably brittle and likely to break, which is something I want to address with doing tests. And the other thing is I want to look at if it would be possible to integrate with a few frameworks. So the first thing I want to check is I want to go to Packagist and see if there are framework integration modules that are already available for this. I'm pretty sure Laravel, SparkPost, I'm pretty sure there is one for this. Okay, fine. So there's the main SparkPost thing. Looks like some Yi and Symfony stuff. Maybe I should just search for SparkPost to begin with. Yes, SparkPost. Okay, so only 3 of these things. Laravel, SparkPost. I don't want to make just a Laravel integration. I don't even want to make this dependent on Laravel. But what I do want to do is see if there is already a PHP library to integrate this with Laravel. Looks like someone is starting it. The next release of 5.2 will contain a mail driver for SparkPost. Let's go have a look if that's true. Laravel framework. Dun, 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 dun. I wonder if it'll be Illuminate Mail. Mail? Transport? There we go, SparkPost Transport. So, a month ago, SparkPost was added to Laravel, which is cool. Okay, what about Silverstripe SparkPost? Doesn't appear to be, so maybe that's a good thing to integrate with. Okay, that aside, what I'd like to do is I'd like to start writing some tests. So if you have questions about this, by all means, feel free to ask in chat or tweet, I guess, if you prefer that. I'm actually just going to close this or minimize this window. Right. Okay, so let's look at where we were. I have this index file. I have a config file, which I don't think I want to open because I think it has credentials. Yes, looks like it does. Okay, so I started off by creating a client class, and this isn't an HTTP client from Guzzle. This is a SparkPost API client. So this is a client in this file here as sort of a first port of call. It takes a new Guzzle client. So this is what's going to send the requests to the REST API of SparkPost. So it takes a Guzzle client as the first parameter, and then the SparkPost API key. And if I recall correctly, the API key is used for authentication. So you add this as a header or a post parameter. I can't remember which. I think it's an HTTP header for authentication, and that's how it says if you're allowed to send mail through it. So the first approach was to get the results of a request to client create transmission. Now in SparkPost, again, if my memory serves, transmission is the name of the process or the entity surrounding sending mail. So when you send a bunch of mail, you send a transmission, which is where the wording for this comes from. So our API client create transmission, and then we can do some content-based things and some meta things like recipients. But I didn't elaborate too much on the structure here, and there is quite a lot that you can do with the SparkPost API. I don't think I want to spend too much time embellishing this. I'd like to get some tests up and get it on Scrutinizer, and then release just a anyone can use version, and then improve it from there. So I'm not going to go full out and develop the whole thing first. I'm just going to try and get something slightly releasable and see if people like it. But what I did after this was, on top of this client, I added some proxies or aliases. Let's see. Oh, that's right. Okay, so this API, this array I can actually squash like that, and I can do some comments now because I'm in PHP Storm as opposed to Atom, which I made this in. Okay, so I have this aliases idea, and the aliases are classes that are proxies around the main functionality of the client. In this case, I haven't given them interfaces because they're all going to be representative of different kinds of data objects in the SparkPost API. So I haven't made them conform to an interface, but I'm going to have a general pattern here where they all accept a client instance, which is this client class, and then they can call methods on that. So you can feed in an array of options like this kind of thing, and the format of this options array can be different to what the SparkPost API accepts. Like I can make my own little API structures around this, and then translate it to the the SparkPost API structure, which looks like this, and then send it through the main client. So this is basically just going to be a thin proxy. I don't even think I'm going to validate anymore. And the reason for this is that the SparkPost API does validate that stuff. And I'm just going to end up duplicating that validation and having to make tests to check that that validation works when the SparkPost API already does this. So I don't think I'm going to do the validation, but I will do translation, which I'm doing here. The way that this translation appears to work is that in that main array that I accept here, I can do recipients, HTML, from, and subject, all as top-level items, and then they will get passed into the specific nested structure. Okay, fine. And back in that create transmission function, I actually have default options that I merge this options array into. So if you want to send via create transmission, you have to send in the structure. On the other hand, if you use client transmission create, it goes to the aliases array of the client class, creates an instance if one doesn't exist of the transmission proxy object, and then calls the create method on it. So here the structure is very different from the structure here. But the proxy class translates the structure into the one that SparkPost's API will accept via this stuff here. Okay, fine. We can add some comments. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Generate some comments just to make sure that this all looks 100%. Okay, not a lot of code in there. Oh, that's the class I was in. There's not a lot of code in here, but that's okay. I think that's okay. All of these things have properties. Yes, fine. Oh, this one doesn't. Now, return mixed is fine. Property is going to be a string. Ooh, now what do I have here? I'm not returning for something, which is interesting. Missing return statement. It's interesting that it would hint that because mixed could be void. Does this go away? No, it doesn't. That's pretty strange. What exceptions do I have here? Throw, new, missing, property. Never mind. this inspection, I don't really know about it. I don't really want to return something weird here because I'm only interested in returning if there is a valid alias proxy class. So I think I'm okay with this inspection returning something weird here. But basically we want to translate this set of examples into some tests. And you would kind of do this the other way around if you were doing test-driven development, which is an approach that I prefer, but when we were doing this, we were being very ad hoc and experimenting. So maybe doing tests first isn't the fastest or the most interesting way to experiment like that. But now that we have, it seems weird to write the tests after writing the implementation code, but I'm going to do that anyway, because I don't want to start over. I kind of like this approach, and I want to stick with it. Let's try and write the tests without looking too much at the implementation and see how close we get. So we'll make a tests folder. We need to, let's see, what did I call this? Tutorial SparkPost. There we go. Composer require PHP unit. Ooh, hold on. Oh, I have the right version linked. Okay. Oh, composer require PHP unit. Okay, that'll take a while. I just noticed I don't actually have my overlay on here, so I'm going to get that up quickly. Does that work? Fine. Sorry about that. Oh, I should have had that up sooner. Thanks for the follow. I'm not even going to try and pronounce your name. Anyway, let's see how PHP unit's getting on. This might actually take a little bit of time. I hope not too long. But let's mimic the structure of this. So we'll have, let's test the proxy first. So proxy, and this is transmission proxy test. Transmission test, I guess. Because we want to have as close to the class name as possible, but with a test suffix. Then we'll say namespace SparkPost API test, yeah, whatever, test proxy, and then the class is transmission proxy. Transmission test. Okay, here's the thing. I want to make a central test class. We'll just call this test, and it has a very similar namespace, but I want to group common functionality in here. Okay, test abstract class test extends PHP unit. This isn't installed yet, has it? Come on, be quick. Okay, I'll do that just now. Test proxy. I actually have to declare this. Abstract class test. And then in here we can extend this import class. Fine. Public function, let's see. It can create transmissions. And this is, and we need to add a test annotation here because I don't want to start my class with test underscore or test and then the rest of the word. I'd rather just have this as the name for it. So what do we want to do here? We want to create, oh, that's another thing we need is mockery. Composer require mockery. Anyway, we can come back to this test class and we can extend. Oh, it's loading in all the classes. Good old PHP unit, hey? Gotta index those files. Extends PHP unit framework test case. Oh. So disappointed that that's not namespaces yet. What version did it put in here? 5.3. Seems legit. Okay, public function teardown. Mockery close. When mockery is loaded in, that'll actually get resolved. I'll import the mockery class to have this resolved. Now, if you haven't done testing before, if you haven't used PHP unit or mockery before, this may seem strange. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a test for this class. And look at what this class needs. When I create a new instance of the transmission proxy class, I expect to have a SparkPost API client instance. But I don't want to create an actual client instance when I test this class, because I'm not testing the client instance here. I want to test just this class. And I can get around loading that extra stuff in by creating what's called a mock. Now, there's a lot of terminology when it comes to test-driven development, and I won't bore you with what that is because a lot of it's very nitpicky and you don't really get the subtlety of it until you do a lot of testing. But I'm going to use mock to describe an object that looks like something, looks like a dependency, perhaps adheres to an interface, perhaps extends a class, but isn't actually a real implementation. It's just a fake kind of thing that you can call functions on as if it was a real kind of thing. And you can return specific responses from those functions. So you can fake your way through an interaction with something that looks like a real dependency, but isn't, for the purposes of not testing a real dependency when you're not trying to test it. Hopefully that made some sense. But you'll see what I mean as we go along. Okay, oh, I don't need to create that class. I need to use mockery. And that'll let me go here. There should be a close function on here. Yes, there is. Okay, fine. Now, in order to create those things, those fake objects, I'm going to use a library called mockery, and mockery is very good at doing this, in my opinion. But to make sure that it doesn't do anything weird because of how it creates these fake objects that look so real, you need to close them. You need to close the instances of them. That's probably the best explanation I can give you for why that is necessary there. Now, we need to create a fake SparkPost SDK client. And to do that, we'll just say, I'll just call this mock. Is mockery. I need to use mockery, I guess. Mock is mockery. I'm going to try and remember the syntax. I haven't used mockery in a very long time. Let's see. Mockery mock. Okay, and then I give this a class instance. So now I'm going to say client. Hello. Why don't I have my client instance here? I'm going to have to import this before I do this again. Lame. Use client. Let's see what this gives us. Okay. What do I need to get this to work? Oh, that's right. I need a PHP unit configuration file. And I don't remember how to write one offhand, but I do know a good place that has it. GitHub, Silverstripe, shared draft content module. This is like my favorite Silverstripe module because it has all the things to make it great. Except a PHP unit configuration file? Am I blind? Does it not have this? Okay, let me go to another module. This is my second favorite module of all time because apparently this has more stuff. PHP unit XML. Okay, there we go. Now excuse for a moment my editor's syntax highlighting because it's going to be ugly. PHP unit XML Ooh, that is ugly. Sorry about that. Something has gone wrong with my syntax highlighting, and I lament. Most of this you don't actually have to worry about. It loads the composer vendor autoload file, which is how it knows which classes to load because of their namespaces. It says test the tests directory, all files with the suffix test.php that contain classes that you can instantiate. So it won't load our abstract test class, but it will load our transmission test class. And then filter out everything to add to the whitelist, which is everything in the source directory with the suffix .php. So this is for code coverage reporting, which we'll hopefully see soon. But what I want to do very quickly is go vendor. Oh wait, one more thing I have to do. In order for PHP unit to find these files, I probably want to autoload them. Autoload dev, which means it'll only autoload this when it is in a development environment. PSR4. That declaration is fine, but I have the test suffix, and this is in the tests folder. To get this to run, I have to do composer dump autoload, which is du for some reason, and then vendor bin php unit. There we go. Okay, so it's running. It found the class to instantiate because it has created an instance of the transmission test class. And this that you see here is just a whole lot of mockery code. We'll see instances of this. Mockery. This is a whole lot of mockery code. And it's there because I am creating a mock here of the client class, the SparkPost API client class. So if I do get methods, get class methods, I wonder if it'll use an instance or if I'll have to give. There we go. Okay, you see I've got all these methods that are being called, and they belong to the mock. So I can call these on the mock, but the thing that I'm looking for here is the construct, get, construct, and create transmission, or specifically construct and create transmission. These aren't part of the mockery interface. They are part of the transmission proxy class, because I have construct here and I have create. That looks wrong. Oh, no, I'm looking at the wrong class. It's the client class. Fine. Okay, so the methods I should see on here are construct, create transmission, request, and get. Although I don't think request will be there because it's a private method. So create transmission, construct, and get. And those I have here because this is simulating the client class, even though it's not really the client class. I'm going to be able to say, instead of giving the usual response or running the actual class code, give a fake response for these so that I can use that in tests, and it's a known quantity. On that note, I'm going to take a quick 2-minute break. So stick around and listen to some music, and I will be back very shortly.